Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my October wrap up. Yes, you read that correctly. I read 27 books in October. It's a record for me. I have never read that many books in a month, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible because 27 obviously is a lot to talk about. But let's just go ahead and get right into it. I want to start off with talking about 3 rereads that I did. I reread 3 5-star horrors and I listened to them on audio in October. So the first of those was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, which is one of my all-time favorite books, and I've heard really good things about the audiobook. So I wanted to pick that up and it was still a 5-star, still loved it. And then I did Horror Movie by Paula Tremblay because once again, I've heard really good things about that audiobook. This is one of my top books of the year and I think that still holds true after this reread, and I do think the audiobook is really well produced. So if you're able to experience the story that way, I would definitely recommend it. And then the last reread that I had in October was Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This is one of the first horror books that I remember actually creeping me out when I read it. And I think for this one, I do prefer physically reading it. I just wasn't a big fan of the narrator for this audiobook. It just wasn't to my personal taste, so maybe you'll enjoy it, but it was still a good story and still a creepy book and a good one to read in October. So with those out of the way, we are going to go through everything else that I read. As usual, I'm going to be starting from the lowest rated and working my way up to those 5-star books that I had in October. So I want to start off with a book that I actually did not rate, and that was Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. I was very excited to read this one. I have been having a good time with Stephen Graham Jones this year. I've had 2 5-star reads by him, and one of those is a contender for my top 10. So I was really excited to pick this one up because I've had my eye on it for a long time. This is an older release, but unfortunately I just didn't connect with the story and I didn't connect with the characters. This is about a family of werewolves and we are following this one character in particular who is still a young boy, and he is going through a lot of like normal teenager changes, but then he's also waiting for that moment to come where he does have that transition into a werewolf because it hasn't happened for him yet. So a lot of it is about this like background and the history of werewolves in this world that Stephen Graham Jones has created, and then we're also getting a lot of the characters' story and their family dynamics as well, which I think is definitely a thing that Stephen Graham Jones does really well, is he builds out these characters, and a lot of times he stuffs his book with these like mundane details, but it always kind of tends to work for me. But unfortunately in this one it just didn't work for me, and I feel like I just was lacking that character connection, so I didn't really care about anything else that was going on. So with this one, I feel like, yes, I read it and I understood like what happened and what the story was, but I just don't think I took away enough from it to give it a rating, because in the end of the day, like, it was my own personal feelings that hindered the reading experience and not the writing or the story itself. Moving on, my lowest rated book was 2.5 stars, and this was The Drift by CJ Tudor. This is like a sci-fi horror mystery thriller. I read this was one of the books that my boyfriend picked for me, so if you want to go watch that reading vlog where I talk in depth about my feelings towards this book, we are basically following 3 different POVs in this world where there has been a viral pandemic that makes people sort of into zombies. They are called, I think, whistlers, and we're following 3 people in different situations, life or death situations in this world. And I just feel like at the end of the day, like, this book tried to do too many things. There were so many elements thrown in there and they didn't really come together cohesively or in a way that I enjoyed, and by the end I was just like, this is dumb, I'm over it. And then I also had like so many questions still. I just feel like this is a book that you're thrown into and just like expected to know the world and the history and how we got from point A to point B, and it never really gets explained. Moving on now to my 3-star books. I need to pull up my list for this. So my first 3-star was The Vile Thing We Created by Robert P. Ottone. This has been on my TBR for a really, really long time. We are basically following this young married couple, and they don't have any children. They've never really wanted kids, but all of their friends have kids, and they find that they are being excluded from their friend group because they don't have a child. So they decide, well, let's just have a kid. And then there are some things deeply wrong with that child, and more unravels as you read. I just feel like the pacing in this one was the biggest flaw, where there was long stretches of time where nothing was really happening, and we were going through this like day-to-day routine, but it was kind of the same things over and over and over again. And then like the last 20 minutes of the book is when the characters actually start investigating and figuring things out and getting answers to what's really going on. And then I just felt like that was underdeveloped because it was rushed so quickly. This book is over 400 pages, so I feel like there was definitely room to fix that pacing and make things happen in a more timely manner. Next is Your Mind is a Terrible Thing by Haley Piper. I'm gonna be so for real, I really don't remember that much of this book. We have this main character who is on a spaceship, and they wake up and they find that their ship has been taken over by these strange alien creatures that can go inside of, like, take over the minds of the other crew. But the main character we're following is kind of like there was a word for it, where they have like robot parts inside of them as well as human parts, so their brain wasn't able to be penetrated fully, and so they're kind of the last one trying to survive and figure out what is going on. It was interesting. There were things that I enjoyed, and I really liked the concept. I do want to read more from Haley Piper. This was my first book by her, but I've heard so many things. I just don't think this one really clicked fully with me, but I will check out more of her work in the future. My next 3-star was The Beauty by Aaliyah Whiteley. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a very short kind of dystopian eco-horror. We are in this community of men after a disease has killed all of the women there. And one day in the ground where these bodies of the women are buried, a strange mushroom sprouts. And from there, it turns into sort of like a tale of obsession. It gets very weird. There's like this mushroom creature thing coming to life, and it's feminist, and it was really fascinating at some points, but I feel like there was a lot that went over my head and I didn't fully understand like everything that the book was trying to do. But I did enjoy the parts, like the parts of it that I liked, I really liked, but then the rest of it I was like, I don't really know what's going on. And my last 3-star book was Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. This is a pretty chunky short story collection. I actually have it on my shelf. I guess I could pull it out. A pretty chunky short story collection in here. And I didn't, usually with short story collections, I individually rate every story, and I was doing that, but there were so many that were just like so short, didn't resonate with me at all. I had absolutely zero feelings towards them in the end, so I didn't rate a lot of things. But the ones that I did really enjoy were The Jaunt, as well as Grandma. Some other standouts were Survivor Type, The Raft, because I recognize that from Creepshow 2. The Mist is in here as well. Uncle Otto's Truck was kind of interesting. Beach World was kind of interesting. There's really a lot. There's something for everybody, but specifically to talk about the two that I mentioned, I guess, The Jaunt is kind of like a sci-fi one. This is the story of this like scientist who figured out a way to, teleport, travel from one place to the other, and so now we are following this family that is going to be undergoing like this teleportation process, and we're learning the history of it, and I think it's really fascinating and has a end that will definitely stick with you. In the story Grandma, we are following this young boy who is left home alone with his elderly grandmother, who he's a little bit frightened of. There is definitely a dark history within this family. There's a lot of family secrets, and he's just a little bit spooked by his grandmother, and rightfully so, but I really like the way that the story was written. I thought it was really fascinating and it was very unsettling, so those two were the standouts for me. So now we can move on to my 3.5 stars. My first 3.5 star was Off Season by Jack Ketchum. This is definitely, I would say, like a cult classic novel. Like, there's a lot of people that have read this and have enjoyed it, and it's been talked about over the years. I think this came out in the 80s, I want to say, and I can definitely understand, like, being in the 80s, like, this would have been so brutal and so shocking and so graphic, and it definitely still is today, although I would say, like, less so, because there's so much, like, extreme horror that exists today, which is kind of interesting. But this is about a group of people. They are in this isolated cabin in rural Maine, and they pretty much get, like, targeted by this group of backwoods cannibals that just, like, lives out there and eats people. And it was interesting. There were a lot of things I liked. There were things that I didn't like. I think this book definitely shows its age in certain ways, specifically with, like, the female characters. And I didn't really like the writing that much, because I feel like the story kept going off on these, like, weird tangents that the author was, like, including, like, weird pointless things that didn't matter at all to anything that was happening and just seemed so out of place. So those were my favorite. Overall, 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't, like, mind-blowing like I was expecting it to be. My next 3.5 star was Mr. Glowbones and Other Halloween Tales by Ronald Kelly. This is a very short story collection, which I read in my reading vlog, where I read Halloween books, obviously. So the standout stories for me in this one were the title story, Mr. Glowbones, also the story called Pins and Needles, and one that was called Billy's Mask. They were just very fun, very short, maybe a little bit cheesy at times, maybe have tropes that you've definitely seen before, but it was really fun to get that Halloween spirit, and I had a good time. The next 3.5 star book that I had was Cackle by Rachel Harrison. This is a little witchy book. We are following this woman who has just left a very long relationship where she was with somebody for 8 years, and she is really struggling to find herself and figure out who she is without this other person attached to her. So she moves away to a small town, gets a new job, and she befriends this woman, I believe her name is Sophie, who is a witch, and everybody in the town is kind of, like, scared, a little bit nervous around her, and these two women begin this very strong friendship, and things escalate, and I really liked it for the cozy vibes that it brings. It was very atmospheric, perfect for fall time. It had some cute little side characters. One of them was a spider who was freaking adorable, and overall it was fun, but once again, like, it wasn't anything that I was, like, mind blown by. My next 3.5 star read was All Hallows by Christopher Golden. This is another little Halloween book. So in this one, we are following a few different perspectives of different families that all live on the same street one Halloween night. 3 children turn up out of nowhere, and they are begging these people to protect them from the Cunning Man. So then begins this fight for survival as they try to figure out who the Cunning Man is, who these children are, how can they protect these children, how can they protect themselves, and it's also a lot about the family dynamics. There are a lot of dysfunctional families and a lot of really horrible people within this book, and that's what most of the story is focusing on, is the characters and a lot of the build-up within the characters, and I thought that was all great. I like Christopher Golden's writing, but I wish that we got more build up on the Cunning Man himself and the, like, actual horror part of the story, because I feel like that kind of fell a little bit flat, where we didn't get all of the history and background that I think would have benefited the reading experience. My next 3.5 star was Clown in a Cornfield 3, The Church of Friendo by Adam Caesar. This one was kind of a little bit less enjoyable for me than the other books in the series, but I don't know if that's necessarily, like, the author's problem or the book's problem. I think it's just, like, me kind of losing interest in the series as it goes on, but it was still enjoyable. If you want a kind of crazy, silly slasher book, then I would still recommend this. Obviously, I'm not going to talk too much about it because it is the third book in a trilogy, so it's not going to make sense unless you've read the other two, but it was just okay. My next 3.5-star book was This Is Where We Talk Things Out by Caitlin Marceau. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a novella that I have seen so much over the years. I've heard so many good things about it. For me, it was just okay. In this story, we are following a woman who has a very strained relationship with her mother. Her mother's definitely narcissistic and was definitely like emotionally and verbally abusive to our main character when she was growing up. Her father has just recently passed away and she pretty much has no contact with her mom, but she does agree one weekend to kind of go on a little getaway with her. She's hoping this will help to repair maybe some parts of their relationship. Maybe things will be different after her father's passing. Maybe her mother will kind of mellow out a little bit, and she just decides, you know, maybe it's time to try to fix the relationship. So she agrees to go with her mother to this little cabin up in the mountains and just kind of stay there for the weekend. Little do they know that there is this big snowstorm coming, and they end up getting stuck in the cabin, and her mother becomes way crazy unhinged by the end of the story. I really enjoyed the first half of this, I think, more than the second half. I really liked the build-up, and the tension was like so well done. Like the tension between these two characters was jumping off the page, like you could feel it. And so I really like that. I really like the writing. I will definitely read more from this author, but I feel like it was a little bit predictable at times. I just kind of wish, like with how much I was enjoying the first half, I wish it went like a little bit weirder and a little bit darker, but that's just me. That's my own personal preference. And my last 3.5-star was Smother Moss by Elisa Allering. This is kind of like a mystery thriller, but it's also kind of a horror. There are a lot of different elements within here, but we are primarily following these two sisters that live in the mountains of Appalachia, and they live with their mother. They have a very hard life because they're very poor. They don't have a lot of things. And then one day, two hikers on the Appalachian Trail turn up dead, and there is a murderer on the loose that the police have no clue as to the whereabouts of this person. So then the two sisters are obviously starting to fear for themselves and for their lives, and they really must work and overcome a lot of things in order to face the situation and save themselves and protect their family and protect their way of life. I think that was really interesting. The big part of this story is this sisterly relationship. It is very character driven, so if that's something you like, then you might enjoy this. But there were a lot of elements going on in here. We had some like paranormal, like supernatural elements. There was magic, there was monsters, obviously there's a murder mystery, and I thought it was all really interesting. However, do be warned that this is a book where there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of things are left open to the reader's interpretation. This is not a book that you are going to go in and get a satisfying ending, things are going to wrap up and you're going to get all the answers you ever asked for. That is not this book. Don't go in expecting that. You will be disappointed. But if you like things that are abstract and open for you to interpret and ponder, I think this book has a lot of different things that you can think about and discuss with other people. So moving on to my 4 stars now. We are working our way up. My first 4-star is Nothing But the Rain by Naomi Salmon. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a little dystopian novella. We are reading the journal entries of a woman that is in a town where one day it started raining and never stopped, but the rain also causes amnesia. So the longer you're exposed to the rain, the more that you forget. So if you're out there for a few seconds or a minute, then maybe you'll forget like last night or a couple of days. But if you're out there for hours, then you'll start to lose years of your life. So it was really interesting, and I like the way that the story was told. And we have 3 different parts. Like I said, we're reading the journal entries of this woman, and there's still a lot of mystery and a lot of things that get unfolded within the story, even though it was so short, and I would definitely recommend this. I really enjoyed it. My next 4-star was One Must Go by Alex Reed, which is another little Halloween book. We are following 3 children on Halloween night where they are approached by this, it's like a demon creature thing that basically says like, you are the chosen ones. I'm going to take one of you at the end of the night. You guys get to decide amongst yourselves who is going to be that person that I take with me. And then we follow these kids as they're trying to stay alive through the night, but then they're also faced with this really difficult decision of having to sacrifice one of their group to this entity. It was fun. There was a lot of murder. There was a lot of these really nice Halloween and autumn atmosphere vibes, and on that alone I would definitely recommend it. This is just one of those books that is there for pure entertainment, and it was definitely entertaining. My next 4-star was Rotten Tommy by David Sodergren, which was a buddy read with Cliff's Dark Gems, and we did a live show about it, which is on my channel if you do want to watch it and get like all of my thoughts on this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was very close to being a 5-star, but then in the end there were so many questions left unanswered. But I really like the way that David Sodergren approached that and how it really works for some people. Some people were telling me they love that they didn't get any answers, and that was a 5-star. And then there's people like me that was like, well, I wish we got a little bit more. This is about, I didn't even say what it's about. This is about a woman who finds one day in the walls of her home, I think it's 3 VHS tapes, and she unknowingly unleashes an entity called Rotten Tommy, and a murder spree ensues, and we are following this woman finding her place in the world. And there were a lot of great things that happened, and obviously I'm a David Sodergren fan. My next 4-star was Kill Creek by Scott Thomas, which I also read as a Halloween book because for one of the main events in the story, we are following these characters on Halloween night. We have 4 different authors from different spaces within the horror community, and they get the chance to spend the night in Kill Creek, which is this like notorious haunted farmhouse. And they are there for Halloween night. Some strange things happen. They get out, they go home, and once they get home, they realize that they are still within the grips of this house, and they have to fight very hard to try to break out of that. And I really like it. I really love the way that the story ended, and there was so much conversation in here about like the literary world and about horror and creating a horror story, and just talking about authors and references to horror media, movies and things, and I really enjoyed all of it. I love the writing. I'll definitely be reading more from Scott Thomas. And my last 4-star was actually a nonfiction book. This is Behind the Horror: True Stories That Inspired Horror Movies by Dr. Lee Meller. So it's pretty much exactly what the title says. We start with a movie from the 30s, and then we end in 2019, and we go through the years and look at different horror movies, different iconic horror movies. So there's like The Exorcist, Annabelle, and like the Conjuring universe, The Witch, what else is in here? Psycho, just all kinds of popular horror movies and the stories that inspired them. So it goes from like true crime and real life like murder cases, and then we also dip our toes into like the paranormal world, and we learn about hauntings and poltergeists and demon exorcisms. It was really fun. It was very intriguing and very easy to read and to digest, and I think all of the chapters were kept really short and sweet, so you could pick it up, read one chapter about one movie, put it down, pick it up the next day, read about another movie. And there's picture inserts, and pictures are always fun in books when you're an adult. Moving on now, I had 2 4.5-star reads this month. The first one is Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge, which is another Halloween book that I read. This takes place in this farm town where they have this Halloween tradition where the October Boy, who is basically like this scarecrow with a jack-o'-lantern head, comes out every year and fights to the death with a bunch of teenage boys that live in this town. I really like the writing. I think the biggest complaint that I see with this book is a lot of people that don't enjoy the writing style, and I will say it definitely will not work for everybody. The way that it's narrated at parts, it is very direct to the reader. We have a narrator that is talking to us, but we also get these fun perspectives of characters within the story, and overall I just really liked it. It was really fun. It gave me everything that I wanted, and it was kind of like folk horror-esque, but it was also like all about Halloween, and I just really liked where the story went, and that's pretty much it. Next for 4.5 stars is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This, I have seen the movie already, so I knew kind of the story before going into it, but I really enjoyed the book more than I thought I would, honestly. I don't know, I think like the movie for me was maybe 3 or 3.5 stars if I was gonna give it a rating like that, but I really loved the writing and the story. This is about a very dysfunctional family that is stuck in their bathroom after receiving a tornado warning. So obviously they're trying to stay safe from the storm. They end up getting stuck in there, and there's a lot of tension and a lot of secrets that are revealed, and then things get weird because these people are stuck in there without like food and electricity, and they're starting to lose their minds a little bit. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't give it 5 stars because I do feel like it lost me just a little bit at the end where things get really crazy, but I just really loved everything else about this book. Like, it was very near to perfect for me. Okay, now we are on to my 5-star category. I had 4 5-star books this month. I had to think about that. The first one was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This was actually my last book of October, I think. I don't think I really have to delve into too much of what this is about because it is such an iconic story, and it's a movie that we've all seen and loved. Hopefully. I know I've seen it a million times, so I knew the story before going in, but I really loved the book and the way that things were written, and I really liked that, I don't know, I just had this movie to visualize while I was reading the book, and the movie also like uses a lot of things like word for word, which I really enjoyed. I think the movie does a good job of expanding on things a little bit more and drawing these scenes out and kind of upping the stakes a little bit, but overall, like as a book, I really enjoyed it. My next 5-star was To Be Devoured by Sarah Tantlinger, which is another little novella. This is about a woman who has a very troubled past. A lot of traumatic things have happened to her. Now she is in a relationship with a woman who she loves very deeply, and she is going to therapy to work out some of her problems, but one day she becomes obsessed with watching the vultures that are near her home, and she just like in her head, she's like, I need to know what the vultures know. I need to be one of them. And so she starts to eat like a vulture by eating the dead, rotting flesh of dead animals. It was nasty. It was dark. It was messed up. I really loved where it went. The writing was absolutely exquisite, and I will think about this book for a very long time. My next 5-star was Halloween Fiend by C.B. Hunt, which is another novella and another little Halloween book. This is about a very small town that has, once again, kind of a unique tradition. They have this creature that lives there, and this creature's name is Halloween, and he comes by every night to get a little sacrifice, a little blood sacrifice that is usually a small animal like a guinea pig or a cat. And then once a year on Halloween, he requires a much larger sacrifice. And we are following this one character who is becoming more and more like obsessed with Halloween and wanting to get a glimpse of Halloween and get as close to Halloween as they can without getting hurt. And I really liked it. I like where the story went, I liked the writing, and it was just a perfect, cute little, I don't know if cute's the right word, but it was a perfect little Halloween read for me personally. And last but not least, my last 5-star for October was We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver, I believe is how you pronounce it. This book is everywhere, you know, the hype is there. It's definitely blowing up like crazy, which is really interesting because I remember like hearing about it when it was first announced and being like, oh, that sounds so cool, and I didn't realize like a lot of people were hopping on the train with this book. However, clearly by my rating, you could assume that I think that it lives up to the hype. This is about these 2 women that are living in this home that they recently purchased when this man shows up one night with his family. He has 2 children and his wife with him, and he says, hey, I used to live here when I was a kid, and I just wanted to show my kids around where their dad grew up. Do you mind if we come in for a minute? This woman lets them into the home, but then they have a hard time getting these people to leave, and strange things starts to happen. It gets crazy. I don't even want to say anything more than that, but this is definitely a book that, oh, it's just so fun to read. It is just one of those that like really involves the reader. There are a lot of like secret messages in here and different things to decode. There is like Morse code in here. There's a whole subreddit for this book, which obviously I went and was reading everything on Reddit after finishing this, and it's just one of those where like I finished it and I put it down and I was like, I need to sit here and just like really think about what just happened and try to connect the dots in my head and come up with my theory. And I wanted to read other people's theories. It's just one of those books. I just think it was absolutely fascinating and did some really, really cool things. It was creepy at points and it was mind-bending and once again very thought-provoking. It also reminded me of The Babysitter Lives by Stephen Graham Jones, which I just read a couple of months ago, and like not exactly, but there are a lot of similar elements, I feel like, and they were both 5 stars for me. Once again, I don't really want to say too much about this one because I think it's just fun to get carried away in the story, but it does live up to the hype, in my opinion at least. And with all of that being said, that brings us to the end. That is all 27 books I read in October, which is still blowing my mind that I read 27 books in 1 month. So with all of that being said, comment down below, let me know how many books you read in October, what were some of your top reads, any that you would recommend to everyone, and thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I will see you guys next time.